Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amor de Soi Wellness. And Donovan Jensen is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice and this is Donovan. And today we are going to talk about creating content. You know, social media is such a pervasive aspect of everybody's life, and putting out content is kind of important in this day and age. So I'm curious, Donovan, what are your thoughts about your process of creating content?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that I kind of want to pin down or distinguish is basically like creating content for yourself and creating content for some other purpose, right? Some sort of venture that you're trying to put together,
Right.
whether that be like a business or just something you're passionate about or whatever else. And I think to me, like the real value in social media is being able to like cultivate some sort of relationship, right? And share things with people. And I think there's a very easy trap to fall into of like really worrying about how many views you're getting or how many people are liking your stuff or how many people are looking at your things. And, you know, separating out those two types of content, I think kind of the way you approach them makes a big difference. So, you know, especially if you're looking at your personal content in that way, to me, that's a relationship that I've never been able to cultivate in a healthy way in terms of if I'm focused on how many people like this, how many people cared about this, how many people did this with my own personal stuff, I get into a weird place where it's not about what I feel like posting or the type of content I want to create or how I'm feeling or whatever. It turns into this weird like, oh, what should I make for people and what is going to make people like this and stuff like that. And I found that relationship not very good. And when I can approach it a little bit more from the angle of like, here are the things I'm doing and interested in and what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
And these are the things I would like to share, regardless of who happens to see it. That has put me in a little bit better place. Now, on the flip side, right, when it's for some sort of purpose, right, when it's for like a business or project or interest or whatever else, the posturing or the way that content gets created is a little bit more relevant, I guess is what I'll say. And you know, when I've had these other goals or these things that I'm trying to accomplish, if people like it, if people engage with it, if people find it useful, is a little bit more useful of a metric because I'm trying to build something for people to use. So I think that's the first thing that comes to mind for me is kind of parsing out, okay, am I talking about creating content for me or like to kind of document my life or like show what I'm doing or whatever else? Or am I creating content to build something or as part of a business or whatever else? And I think the main distinction between those two for me is like the way I view it, right? Whether or not, oh, I actually do care about likes and following and this kind of stuff because it signals something to me, right?
Right.
If my following is growing, it signals this is a type of content that resonates with people. Whereas for my personal stuff, I've tried really hard not to buy into those signals as much because I don't want like, oh, do people like that I'm learning to scuba dive? Like that shouldn't be a strong influence on whether or not like I choose to continue that activity. So that's kind of some of my initial thoughts. I know it's not like it's more of a meta than like how do you create content or think about creating content, but I'd be curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think, you know, you brought up a really good point about separating the two ideas, because I think the issue in today's society is that we kind of equate our value with how many likes or followers or subscribers we get. And I think it's important, you know, it is an important metric though, because I own businesses. It's like, I want to know what content is actually resonating with people so I can use that to create more relevant content for people that I'm serving, essentially, that they would find valuable. But it's more about, you know, it's not measuring my value as a human being, but just like the value of the material, their content, the tools that I'm putting out there. Is this something that they're interested in or not? If they're not, then I'm like, let's create something that's more useful or impactful for that person. But regardless of, you know, if they respond negatively, I'm not like, oh, well, I suck at this, I can't do this kind of a thing. It's just kind of separating out the value of myself. And, you know, lately I've been kind of like, I barely do any personal content content creation because I'm like so focused on business. But once in a while, I'll post like a picture of my dog. And yeah, that's like for me. And I don't really care if anyone likes it or not. I love my dog. And so it just feels good to document it and then just see his growth from like puppy to bigger dog. So it's like if I get just like 2 likes or no likes, it doesn't really matter to me. It's nice when, if it shows up in my news feed like a year later, this is what happened a year ago or 3 years ago. And it's like, oh, look at how little he was kind of like one of those for myself. But I think especially in the younger generation, I think we get caught up in this idea that our value of who we are is determined by how many likes we get. It's like, oh, if this picture doesn't get 100 likes, then let's delete it. And for me, I don't know. It's like maybe it's just like that wasn't part of my upbringing, so it doesn't seem as relevant to me. But I understand like the younger generations are kind of like caught up on that a little bit more. So I don't know if they understand how to parse it out because it's like it was just part of their life from the get-go. Whereas for me and probably for you, it just wasn't like that part of my life. I remember a day and age where social media didn't exist. So it's a different experience, I guess. So yeah, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it brings up an important point, which is that like what I said sounds super easy, right? Just disambiguating between
Oh yeah,
your
totally. Right.
project or if you're doing personal
Mhm.
stuff. But for a lot of people, those are interlocked in some way, which is
Yeah.
to say that there are quite a few people who are trying to use their personal interest, thoughts,
Mhm.
their self as a brand to
Mhm.
build future things on. And
Yeah.
when you don't have as clear of a distinction, like for us, I think it's pretty clear in our
Yeah.
projects, like
Mhm.
this is the business I would like to grow, or the
Yeah.
project or the interest group or whatever. And this is me, this is my stuff. This has nothing to do with like my business thing or
Right.
whatever. But I think there is a substantial group of people where there's some sort of weird overlap where it's like, I kind of want to show what I'm doing, but I kind of want me as a person brand to get enough followers and renown that I get opportunities to do some other stuff. And like you were saying, um, I think it's really important that you don't get your self worth tied up in those
Right.
metrics. And I
Right.
think that's where a lot of problems can show up, where
Mhm.
you're trying to, you know, oh, I'm trying to show who I am,
Mhm.
and I want
Yeah.
people to like who I am enough that I build a following and can get more opportunities from that. And if it doesn't
Right.
happen, if I don't get the likes, if I don't get the views, if I don't get whatever external metric, then that means there's something wrong with me. And I think it's so important to pull those two things apart.
Totally.
And the closer tied in your content or projects or whatever it is to who you are individually, the harder that is to break apart.
Mhm.
I don't know if I have a super good off the top of my head way of like really thinking about that because I've tried, to really focus my efforts
Mhm.
into these separate buckets, into these realms of
Mhm.
like, I have that the rap stuff that I've worked on, and I try to, there is a lot of me in that,
Yeah.
but there's not stuff like, hey, I'm learning how to do, this coding thing now. Like that doesn't ever show up there.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what it is thinking about a little bit of
Mhm.
like still disambiguating those two and thinking like what sort of a brand as a person am I building, but without a ton of experience walking that direct route, I am not as confident talking about that as I am with some of the other stuff.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that because as a business owner of 2 businesses, uh, just as far as growth of business, people want to know who you are as a person in a way. And I've always wanted to like keep my personal life separate from my professional life. My personal life is just for that. That's where I put like goofy stuff on whatever, like funny things in my life. And but no, I got to be like professional doctor in this realm. And I've sort of, I guess I've become in that professional realm, I kind of become more lax about it and as have like weaved in aspects of my personal life because that's what people want to see. That's what helps business to some degree. And it's like I've been learning about Facebook ads and apparently what I've been told like a lot of times is the ads that perform better are ones with you doing something like personal in it. Like hanging with my family, or, being silly or whatever it is. And those tend to perform higher. And it's like, for me, my preference would be to not have my face in my ads. I would rather not, but it's like, but if that's going to be a better performing, if that helps boost the business, then I guess I'll go that route. So it's just kind of like understanding, people do want to kind of like a little peek. I mean, I give what I feel comfortable with, and I kind of have sort of been, I think, more relaxed in who I am and more confident in who I am. And it's just like, if people judge me for the silly things I do in my personal life, then okay, that's fine. That's on them. It's just like, this is who I am, my most authentic self. So I guess it doesn't bother me as much. But as I've developed more personally, I've realized, as I'm putting out content, I do want it to be a reflection of who I am. I want it to like speak to my values and represent me accurately, and not put like this idea of what I think people want me to be. I just want to be my most authentic self. If they like it, cool. If they don't, that's okay. Hopefully it'll attract the people that I would want to work with anyways. So that's kind of my thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I think that raises a really good contention, which is there is some amount of authenticity, especially if you're one person trying to run something,
Yeah.
and genuine connection that really resonates with people. But it is kind of a fine line finding the difference between here is this thing that I'm working on, and here is me and my value. Because I actually think that's maybe the highlight of this video is figuring out how to create content in a way that you don't tie up your personal worth with it. Because I think that's what's the most damaging. And with kind of this like deeper look at how we can kind of really get integrated personally with the content we're creating, that's the part that hurts, right? Is feeling like there's some sort of judgment being passed against you, and using that as like a metric for your own worth. And I think another thing, I'm going to shift topics slightly, but I think one of the things that really eases the process is continually creating things. I think when you only create a small amount of things, you get much more in your head, or you're much more attuned to the type of feedback you get. And when you're constantly creating new things and putting them out there and testing them and seeing how they do, you get a lot more flexibility in terms of, oh, these are the types of things that are working, and these are the types of things that are not. And it goes back to that idea of like that, I don't know if it's a study or a parable or what it is, but like making pots, right? You have a class that makes pots, and half is supposed to make a perfect one, and the other half is just supposed to make a certain number. And the ones who make the higher number end up with the better product at the end, as opposed to the ones who spend the whole semester trying to build their perfect pot, because they don't have as much experience and they have so much writing on this one thing.
Right.
It's it kind of applies here in terms of, if you only create 1 or 2 pieces of content a year or whatever else, you're going to be so in your head about like, oh, I hope people like it, and I hope it performs well, and I hope it does this and this and this. But if you're just consistently making things, you just have a much better opportunity to kind of get used to processing the types of feedback, as opposed to letting it overwhelm you in one giant wave.
Yeah, no, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And one of the things I know as a business owner, social media has to be a big aspect of your business. And as someone who doesn't always like posting on social media, I had to get over that. And actually, I think it was last year or the year, but no, yeah, it was, I think 2019 or 2018. I did this whole like 365 days of happiness challenge, where I had to post like one post every single day. I kind of stole that idea from my sister. She had done like a 30-day challenge, and then a 100-day challenge, and then now she just does it every day, like 365 days, and she just starts it every year. And I only did it for 1 year, and I was like, yeah, I'm good. Just like, but it got me like, some days it felt like a stretch, because I'm like, I don't know if there was anything that exciting or that anything that I could be that happy about. And it just feels weird to post something that doesn't seem that relevant. But it got me in that practice of posting consistently. So now it just, because before I was like posting once every month or two or something like that. And that is not going to help my business stay on top of mine if I'm like barely present in social media. And so I had to kind of get over myself in a lot of ways and just put myself out there. And yeah, people resonate. They actually like know what I'm up to. And actually I'm surprised. I'm always thinking, oh, I don't think anyone's gonna like pay attention, or why would they even think this is cool or anything. But then I have like my random friends like come up to me in person or over the phone or however we're interacting and just be like, oh, I saw that you went to like that museum or whatever. Like, I love that place or something like that. Or like, oh, you went to that restaurant. Oh, I love that place. And I was like, oh, it's weird because I didn't tell you that, but that was on social media that they know about it. And now the other thing that I think is kind of what's helped me is kind of going back to that authenticity piece and kind of getting over like trying to get it perfect. I think that's a huge way to sabotage yourself in creating content. And I think we've talked about this before outside of Happy Talks of how difficult it was for us to create content. Like I remember trying to create like a 2-minute video and trying to get it so perfect. Like getting the script perfectly right, getting my eye contact perfectly right, getting my hand motions and gestures perfectly right. And I was just driving myself crazy. And it took me like 60 takes, 4 hours. And I'm like, I cannot spend 4 hours to create 2 minutes of content. This is not gonna cut it in my life because I got other things I gotta get done. And so like now if I do, honestly, I prefer to not like just talk into a camera by myself. It's my personal thing. But if I have to do it, I kind of give myself, you get 3 shots, take the best one, and that's it. And sometimes usually like that first 1 or 2 is like the best one. And then you get in your head and then you're like, oh, I could tweak this. Oh, I could do that. And then it just ruined. And then it's just like a down. And then you just got to stop. You just got to stop and walk away and like take a breather, I think, if it's not exactly how you want it. So for me, it's just getting over the idea of being perfect. And yeah, the more you put yourself out there, the more video content you create. Oh, I remember actually one of my first like getting in front of the camera was I did this project called Healing Around the World, where I interview doctors. And if you go back to my early days of content creation, and I'm like cringing if I watch myself, because even though I'm interviewing these doctors, I say wonderful like every other sentence or something like that one word. It was just like my default word. And I was like, oh, and yeah. And I think all of us as content creators can look back in our early days of content creation and be like, ooh, but then you can reflect on like, wow, I've come a long way. Now I don't say wonderful like every other word or whatever filler word that I tend to say. So, and yeah, it's a lot easier because now we do it consistently, and it's fun in that sense when you get past that hump of trying to get it perfect and just creating because you enjoy it and you want to just contribute something valuable, and it's something you like to talk about. So that makes it easier too. So I know I just threw a whole lot at you. Obviously we both have experience with content creation, and I've got some like pain stories I was just reminded of that brought me back to those days. Yep.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not the easiest thing to do, especially when you're first starting. But as is shared in your journey as well, like it definitely gets easier as you do it more. The other thing that I've really like noticed or taken stock of is that there's a huge difference in finding the style of content that comes to you easily.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, like I also tried at one point to do these really tight scripts, and I tried to do them in one take to make them look perfect. And it wasn't until I sat down and started thinking about like what do I look for? What do I care about when I'm looking at something? I do not care in the slightest if it's in one take. Not at all. So why was I pushing myself to do that when I'm sure you know from recording, like it's so much easier to just like talk, I screwed up, I'm just gonna go back and like re-say the thing I just said, screw that one up, let me just do this one part again. Okay, now let's like paste together these individual sentences. Sure, there's a bunch of jump cuts, sure, like whatever. And like just finding, maybe that doesn't work for everyone. Like, there's different levels of structure that people like or whatnot. But finding what worked for me and what was most natural for me has made a significant difference in creating content, right? Finding both something I want to talk about and a way to talk about it that I like has made it so much easier. And I used to in the past feel pressure to like, oh, you have to create these things and you have to create them in a certain way. And there's no external place that's coming from, right? That's just me going like, oh, it's supposed to be like this. But that's just a mental model that I've created that has no bearing in anything. And I think another thing that's important to anchor into this conversation is the importance or the scope of the content you're creating, which is to say that I used to spend so much time worrying about making the perfect YouTube video, worrying about all the little details, making sure everything was right. And in the grand scheme of things, like you were saying, you can't, or it's not like a good investment to spend hours and hours and hours on one small piece of content unless that is going to deliver the type of results you're looking for. Like if you expect this 2-minute video to get you 7,000 clients that are at $100 a piece or whatever, great, like keep doing that. But for the most part, most of the content is not going to be something that's make or break for your business or brand or page or whatever else. And we've talked about this a few times off the show, but it's more important that you consistently create something than it is that you have the perfect thing. Because what people are looking for is some kind of content coming out on a regular basis, not the most perfect, pristine piece of content. Because again, like the scope of what you're creating in the vast majority of circumstances is small. So the investment should be small. Now, if you're making like a commercial that you're going to spend, $10,000 on, great. Like scope your work appropriately, scope the quality appropriately. But if you're just making, a random Instagram post or a YouTube video or a Facebook post or whatever, like these are low impact types of activities generally. Like, and you're most likely to get traction if you just keep making things instead of like, I'm gonna craft this perfect thing. And as you talked about before, like as you do it, you get experience learning what works and what doesn't. Like you were saying with your old videos that like make you cringe. Like you learn the things that you want to portray as well as the things that resonate and the things that you don't want to do. So there's not any good reasons that I can think of to really like limit your production of things to only the perfect content or whatever else, because you need to create things consistently to learn, as well as to be able to have enough opportunities in front of people. And again, most of the time, these are really low cost, low stakes things. So, getting in your head and spending hours trying to make it perfect, spending more hours refreshing, oh, did I get another like, it's just not a good value ratio.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I really think, to kind of elaborate on what you said about finding a avenue that kind of fits you, because not every avenue is going to be the perfect fit, but understanding that you can find different ways. And that's kind of something both of us had to discover in creating videos on our own was a lot more challenging than to just hop on these Zoom calls with each other and just have a dialogue and conversation. It's just a lot more fun. It's more organic, and it allows us to just be more authentic in ourselves and not worry about the perfection aspects, because it's like we honestly like a newsflash to all our viewers out there, we usually don't even know what we're going to say. I mean, we have the topic picked out, but we don't know exactly how we're going to flesh it out in the episode. It kind of organically manifests, and it's great, because it's like I get a lot of thoughts and insights and tips and tools from Donovan, and I hope he gets the same from me. And when we have a guest, we're always learning more. So it's just really a great learning experience for everyone in a way, and just great opportunity for us to, connect and have a fun conversation. So, that's why we've kind of formatted our show in this manner. And I've never been as consistent with something, because it's like involving another human being that makes a difference, and it's like fun for me. So that's allowed me to like, I've had other projects like content playlists in my YouTube channel, and I've like fallen off the wagon with those because it was just me talking. But with this has been like, I think we're coming up on almost episode 50 now, which I'm pretty proud of. And yeah, it's like it's pretty incredible to see where we've come. And just kind of going back to, again, to finding the avenue of what works best. I was just telling Donovan earlier how for me, writing stuff out is challenging. Like I get writer's block. Like I have to pitch some stories for some media outlets and like write articles and put in a nice clean bullet points. And I'm just like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to write. But you get on. I get on a Zoom call with Donovan and we just pick a topic and then I could just talk forever about anything essentially. And so basically I had someone kind of helped extract that out for me and like clean it up and put it into a nice article on my behalf, but it's still my words. So I was just like, wow, this is so much easier. So maybe I'm not a writer. If I ever write a book, it's going to be spoken and then I'm going to have someone clean it up. and edit it, and that's how my book is going to be written when that day comes. Because yeah, I'm more comfortable with speaking, but I know maybe for other people, writing is their avenue, and they don't necessarily like the conversation. Maybe they do better of just like zoning in on their computer and just like fleshing it out that way. For me, that doesn't work for me. That's not my style. So doing it this way is just so much easier for me. But you got to find what works for you.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like it's when you find whatever it is, like I there was just so much time where I felt like, oh, it's this slog. Like you just have to put your head down and crank through this stuff. And
Yeah.
it sucks, but you have to do it.
Right.
And there's a couple points I want to touch on. One is like the main reason, at least that I can see or think of, for engaging in creating content is to create some sorts of connection, right?
Mhm.
And if I think about it in terms of, would I be happy if my YouTube channel got 12 million subscribers that were all fake? And like, no, not really. Like, what the true reason, right? Like, so I can get caught up in the metrics very easily, but the true reason I'm creating things are to connect with people in some way.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's really easy to lose sight of. But like you were saying, for this, for this format, like that's part of what makes it so easy, is that connection is built in to the creation of the content. And I think that's another thing that people can run into, where they're looking at other metrics and not paying attention to what sort of connections are coming out of it. Because I have had things that perform relatively well, but it's only on the metrics and I don't get any type of connection. I'm not talking to anyone. There's no comments, or like there are comments, but they have no substance. And those don't seem to drive the types of interactions that I actually care about.
Yeah.
Either from a personal or from a business sense. Like those interactions don't seem to do anything. Like, sure, it's nice somewhere, it scratches something somewhere in my mind. It's like, yes, I got another like and another view, subscriber, whatever. Like that's somewhere in there. But when I really sit down and think about what it is I'm trying to drive, this connection piece is like what's actually important. And I don't know if that applies to everyone or connects with everyone, but in the times where also I have things that are not performing as well, it can help me to step back and think about like what do I actually want out of this? Not how am I measuring this, but what is the point of this? What am I doing here?
Right.
And that also helps me with like the way that I engage with things, right? Like I try to be a little bit more mindful when I'm consuming content and think like, what is this adding to my life, and how can this create a connection? Because I don't know about you, but some of the coolest opportunities I've had are from creating content and then having some sort of connection for them, and then having whatever the opportunity is come up. I, for one example, actually wrote a children's book because it never got published. Nothing ever happened with it. But
cool, though.
Someone had seen my poetry videos and whatnot, and they were an illustrator, and they just sent me a message like, hey, I want to make a kid's book. I don't really know how to like write poetry or rhyme. Do you want to take a crack at this? And we'll like go from there. And even though it didn't produce any fruits, like that was a cool, interesting opportunity, and to see some of the designs and whatnot. And like, those are the things that I actually care about. Do I care that I got like another subscriber from that video? Not I mean, yes, but no. Right. So That's just one thing that I kind of want to hone in on. The other piece that I wanted to hone in on is if content creation is not serving you, and by that I mean you don't find joy in it, and it's also not producing anything for you. I think it's pretty easy to feel obligated, and I don't think it's super necessary.
Yeah.
For sure, not at a personal level,
Mm-hmm.
and at a business level, it depends on what the business is, but I think it is possible to have a pretty light touch social media presence
Mm-hmm.
and still do all right as long as your marketing channels are flushed out and you're getting business, right? Like you don't have to necessarily build a side brand of like, here are our values and here are the things we care about. Like, you know, that is probably like a good viable long-term strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just by yourself, I don't know. You might feel differently, but I don't know that it's something you have to have, right? If it's not serving you, like if you're not getting any customers from it,
Mm-hmm.
and you are getting customers from your marketing channels, then
Mm-hmm.
like I just don't feel like you should feel pressured to create content if it doesn't serve you in some way, whether that be connection or business or whatever else. But I'd be curious what you think on that point. Might be controversial.
Yeah, no, I agree to some respect in that, you know, I also I kind of I guess as a business owner, I kind of had resentment that I felt like I had to post on social media to kind of attain my business, but then, you know, I'm putting all these efforts, I'm putting all these posts and it's not really getting me any clients. So it's like, what is all this effort for most of the time? So now I mean I understand it's not necessarily like, ooh, when I post this video, I'm gonna have a ton of clients like banging at my door. It doesn't usually work out that way, but it's just more about like you know staying in their sphere, in their realm, and it's like, you know, maybe when they have that problem, I don't know if it's gonna be a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, and they can think of me and like have that person be that go-to person. Like kind of this idea of like staying on top of mind is important. It's like better to, you know, even if not everyone's in a buying phase, that's something you have to realize. And it's just like, but if they can remember you, maybe from social media posts, you talked about one thing that one time, and maybe like when they have that problem, they're in that right stage of mind to buy. But otherwise, it's just really, you know, for me, I kind of feel like I really like what you said about, you know, thinking about your why of creating content. If it doesn't bring you joy, I think that's really important. It's and transparent. I just realized, you know, part of creating this show, it's like not necessarily to generate a lot of business for me. It's really, you know, for my own joy and to also, you know, create connection. I think we're both huge advocates of connection. We're huge advocates of like personal development and spreading joy and having some sort of impact. If you know, if someone watches this video, they get something out of it, some useful helpful tools to help them feel better in their mood, you know, I think that's a win. I don't care if they spent any money on me or not. If they got like something useful, gave them a smile, I feel like that's awesome. That's a win for me. And you know, I was just thinking about it as you were talking about, like, yeah, like people put out content and it's like kind of like they dread it or have like this resentment or whatever about it. I mean, I've been in that state, but I've also, you know, now that we're creating Happy Talks, I realized how inauthentic that would be. Our show is called Happy Talks. If we were like dreading it and resenting it every week, if we were not having fun, that would just be a terrible show and terrible model and example to show other people how to be happy when we're not being happy creating our content. So it's just like, thank God we enjoy creating our show. We'll keep doing it because we like it. And, you know, I don't know if it's ever going to take off like hugely or not, but it doesn't matter. It's like, you know, maybe again, it's like if someone stumbles upon our video, just one person like watches our video a week, I'd be happy out of that if they got something useful. And if not, at least, you know, I had a nice conversation with my friend Donovan. So I can't lose. Yeah.
Yeah, no, like likewise. I mean, it's just a nice, light, enjoyable way to kind of get some ideas across and communicate about things that we both care about.
Yeah.
I wanted to flesh out one little nuance from the conversation before, which is I think you're right. If your goal is to build a personal brand, then creating content is probably more important.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking, I had in mind like if you're I don't know, like a shovel company or something, you have a shovel company, right? Like maybe you don't have to create social media content, or if you do, you can outsource it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're building a more personal brand,
Hmm.
outsourcing some of it is like you're talking about, like maybe not so authentic,
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
maybe not kind of the long term play. So maybe that's probably the distinction there, is just what
Right.
type of business you have, what your long term goals are, and what you're building, and again your joy level, and whether or not you can outsource that type
Yeah.
of work. I
Well,
just wanted to like keep
yeah.
that apart.
It can still be personal, and you can outsource to help you take the load of putting it out there and repurposing it. Like Gary Vee, he just has someone following him around with a camera all the time. So it's him talking. So it's him. It's his creation, but he has a whole team like making it, editing it, and making it pretty and making it like digestible bites that's content ready for all the millions of platforms that he's on. So it's just like not everyone can afford a team, but just like think about, do the parts that you love. You put videos out, and then, I for this show, I have someone like posted on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, all those different platforms, but I'm not doing that. I was not good at being consistent about doing it. So I realized, yeah, I should probably have someone else do it, but it's me, but then I just like have someone else spread it out for me, which makes my life easier. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, especially on the business end of things, right? If you're
Mhm.
trying to like hit that scale or get it on all the platforms or make sure you're consistent, like
Yeah.
outsourcing what you can, if you're choosing to continue to make like personal content,
Yeah.
can make a huge difference. They can get rid of so much toil and overhead.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I'm like, oh, I could think if someone followed me around on the camera, I'm sure there's something like, there's probably like hours and hours of stuff that is super boring. But if they can just extract out that like one sentence or two that I just like was like really profound, I'm like, sweet, put that up. That'd be great. Yeah. Yeah.
That'd be I yeah. If I could just have someone follow me around and just like take clips of whatever I'm doing that's useful for the world, that would be
Right. That
that
would
would
be
be the
great.
least effort. Just like perfect.
That would be nice, yeah. Well, yeah, but we're a certain boundaries. So I wouldn't want a camera everywhere, but yeah. But anyways, I think we covered the topic pretty well. Anything else that you have last minute? Are we good?
I don't think so. Just my normal recap of like, there's different purposes for creating content. And my key takeaway here would be just spending some time really thinking about what it is you're trying to do, what it is that you want from this content creation.
Yeah.
And then, making sure you're looking and thinking about it at the right metric. I
Mhm.
want 1 million subscribers is not really useful or
Yeah.
fulfilling goal. It is just a metric that you can use to measure something else. So if your content creation journey is centered around some of these metrics, don't get me wrong, they're useful. They're useful for something.
Yeah.
But if that's the end, like in and of itself, you may want to spend some more time kind of considering what it is exactly that you're trying to get out of it, because you may find yourself chasing a metric that doesn't actually mean or produce anything meaningful for you.
Hmm. Yeah. I think that's a great point. Yeah. And remember, if it doesn't give you joy, maybe you should, or well, caveat. I mean, you got to get used to it. You got to practice, get comfortable with the discomfort. But then if it's still painful and miserable, then, find the avenue that works for you. So, all right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
You can check out more content at howtohappy.com. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up to date on the videos. We've also got a Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook that you can check out. Reflect, take action, and enjoy life. See you next time.